Let us pray. O Lord, grant us a daily awareness of the precious gift of life which you have given us. As members of this legislative assembly, we dedicate our lives anew to the service of our province and our country. Amen.
Introduction of visitors. Presenting petitions. Reading and receiving petitions. Presenting reports by standing and special committees. Notices of motions.
Speaker, I'd like to give notice of a motion under Standing Order 40. I'd like to present at the end of question period. The motion reads as follows: that the Legislative Assembly of Alberta send a letter of support and encouragement to Murphy Murabi, leader of the Mass Democratic Movement of South Africa, in light of the recent actions taken by the movement to admit more than 200 blacks and Asians for treatment in whites-only hospitals. Actions which are seen to be the most ambitious civil disobedience campaign against the system of apartheid in South Africa in the last 30 years.
Introduction of bills.
The member for Vegreville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I request leave to introduce Bill 243, the Alberta Lands Inventory and Protection Act. Briefly described, the intent of this bill is to create a commission that would inventory all land in Alberta, categorize it according to its agricultural capability, and then make sure that this valuable land is preserved in perpetuity for agricultural production to address many of the concerns raised by the member for Westlock Sturgeon.
The honourable member for Vegreville has moved first reading of Bill 243, Alberta Lands Inventory and Protection Act. Those members in favour of first reading, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, please say no. Motion carries.
Bill number 243, Alberta Lands Inventory and Protection Act, introduced by the honourable member Mr. Fox, is now read a first time. Tabling returns and reports. Introduction of special guests. Ministerial statements. Oral question period.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Economic Development and Trade. Mr. Speaker, the official opposition is not against providing aid to Alberta exporters if it is done properly, Mr. Speaker, but we are against guaranteeing a company's loans without securing a claim against its assets. We are against a program that does not report its activities to the public, and we're against guarantees granted at a level lower than cabinet. Mr. Speaker, we saw yesterday the beginning of some problems with the Oil Patch Group Incorporated, where we've lost $2 million. Add that to the $2.2 million we've lost in the past, it's over $4 million. Mr. Speaker, we believe that could be the tip of the iceberg, because if the government continues guaranteeing export loans at the rate as established in the first 4 months of 1989, this year's total will be almost double what it was in 1988. So, Mr. Speaker, we don't clear up some of the problems with this program, some taxpayers' money and more could be at risk, Mr. Speaker. My question then, flowing from that, Mr. Speaker, is has the minister investigated a $5 million guarantee to Presentation Pins Incorporated, which has already cost Alberta taxpayers over $500,000 and which generate export sales of only $15,000. Has he investigated that situation?
Mr. Speaker, let me indicate to the honourable member, as I did to his honourable House Leader yesterday, that we feel that the Export Loan Guarantee Program is an instrumental part in increasing export sales of the products that are produced within the province of Alberta. I indicated to them the ratio yesterday whereby we have had close to $500 million worth of sales of products that are produced within this province, and our exposure is somewhere around $60 million. It's a fairly good ratio, Mr. Speaker. We acknowledge that there are some losses because we don't have a perfect record, but the record of losses is slightly in excess of 3 percentage points. In the event that the honourable member does have some suggestions as to how we can improve that program, we're open to his suggestions, Mr. Speaker.
Change the government. Mr. Speaker, Well, we have lots of suggestions, Mr. Speaker, but my second question, and I want to come back specifically to this company, the minister must be aware of it. And I'm asking the minister, does he deny that the government has paid out over $500,000 on a guarantee that has only generated $15,000 worth of sales? Does he deny that, Mr. Speaker?
Mr. Speaker, what we do is we rely on due diligence of the banks themselves that do offer the security. We offer an 85% loan guarantee on the basis of the representations we do receive from both the company and the institutions, with the institutions doing the due diligence, and we rely on them because they have a certain exposure themselves. In the event that the honourable member has some specific companies that he would like me to investigate, I'm more than happy to do so. Again, I would stress, Mr. Speaker, and I recognize that they do have some thoughts. If they do have them, we're happy to examine them as to how we can improve the program.
Well, Mr. Speaker, first of all, it might help if the minister knew what was going on in his department, Mr. Speaker. We've raised two specific examples here, Oil Patch Group Incorporated and Presentation Pins, and we haven't had an answer. Has the minister investigated why in one they went bankrupt 9 months after they got the guarantee from the government, and the other one that we have $500,000 and they've only generated $15,000? I want to know specifically about those companies.
That's right.
Mr. Speaker, as it relates to Presentation Pins, I will ask my department for an update on that. I should share with the honourable member that in the event that he was serious as it relates to his inquiries, he would have had the courtesy of giving me prior notice of his question. But he's obviously not serious, and it's a question more appropriately put. And it's the question more appropriately put on the order paper when he wishes to get into these specifics. As it relates to the company that he raised yesterday, yes, we have done a fairly good investigation of it. As the honourable member is aware, there still is a receiver in place. As I indicated yesterday, as much as we hate to admit it, sir, it was as a result of the downturn of the economy and the oil industry in general that caused some of the difficulties that Oil Patch faced, and for that reason they did encounter financial difficulties. As I indicated, though, and I think it's important to stress, the opposition consistently wishes to deal with the negatives. We acknowledge that there are some negatives, but we also acknowledge, as I indicated yesterday, the significant spin-off job benefits that accrue to the province and to the people of this province because of this very worthwhile program. If he is legitimate in his concern, if he has any concrete suggestions, which we haven't heard one to date, I am willing to examine them.
Thank you. Second main question, Leader of the Opposition.
We'll help you. Just hang on. We'll tell you what to do. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to designate my second question to the member from Vegreville. Oh, sorry. They changed on me. Calgary Forest Lawn.
Forest Lawn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
That means Calgary Forest Lawn. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, the federal and provincial Conservatives have shown themselves willing to say and promise anything during election campaigns. Construction of the Husky Upgrader was promised on at least 8 occasions before the actual first spade of dirt was turned. In October last year, Albertans, especially those that were in the Fort McMurray area, were delighted to hear the Prime Minister's announcement about the imminent start of the Oslo project. Well, today, the chief economist of the Conference Board of Canada predicted that this project will now be on hold until 1992, a date that's obviously just before the next federal election. My question is to the Premier. Is the Premier aware of any change in the federal government's purported commitment to this project, which is so vital to all Albertans?
Absolutely none, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah, no change.
Well,
no
that's
change.
par for the government's course. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, my second question to the Premier, will his government communicate to the federal government in the strongest possible terms that the federal government must live up to its commitment to this project?
That's very clear, Mr. Speaker. Of course, there were discussions with the federal government following their budget. There's no question as to the commitment of the federal government. And I might point out to the honourable member and to the House that there is an Oslo plant proceeding, and there's only one reason it's there and proceeding, and that's because this government went out and fought for it to be there.
Mr.
do a better
Speaker,
job than he did with
my
Via.
final supplementary is to the Minister of Federal and Intergovernment Affairs. And given that the people of Newfoundland have also fallen victim to this strategy of broken promises, will the Minister communicate to Newfoundland an interest in making a joint presentation on this matter of keeping promises with respect to energy projects at the upcoming meeting of the First Ministers?
Mr. Speaker, Oslo is going ahead. The Premier has already indicated that. We've had no indication of anything else taking place. It's on schedule as far as we are aware. It's an interesting notion that we should join forces with Newfoundland towards ensuring that a project there also go ahead, although it is related to the extraction of hydrocarbon resources within the greater boundaries of Canada. It is not the responsibility of our government. However, I could say this, that it's my intention to meet with the Premier or his designate from the government of Newfoundland with respect to Senate reform prior to the Premier's conference to be held later this month in Quebec City. And I'm sure that that will be a topic that would be useful to discuss with the Premier at that time.
Member for Edmonton Glengarry, Leader of the Liberals.
Mr. Speaker, the former Premier of our province, Mr. Lougheed, and his colleagues during their day promoted the development of an Alberta financial industry at all costs. When our Premier took over in 1985, the climate in Alberta was considerably different, and the Premier and his cabinet went to great efforts to protect the little that Alberta had left in the financial industry area. They tried to keep it alive. Credit unions were in grave difficulty. 2 chartered banks had been called down by the federal government, leaving only one major player, that being the Principal Group. My question is to the Premier. Mr. Premier, is it not true that when you did take over in 1985 as the Premier, that you and the Premier and the Cabinet, government, had deep concern over the health of this financial industry in Alberta?
Mr. Speaker, the government, of course, is concerned about all aspects of life in Alberta.
Wow. Mr. Premier, this one isn't as hard. Mr. Premier, Mr. Speaker, a question is to the Premier. Is it not true, Mr. Premier, that your government had an obsession with the promotion of this Lougheed dream that is keeping the remnants of this financial industry alive, and that obsession blinded you, and blinded the Premier rather, and the government to the fact that Albertans were being fleeced, that they were being taken to the cleaners, and that these 2 companies should have been shut down?
Mr. Speaker, the honourable member should know that we don't anticipate his questions being hard. And in reply to his second question, Mr. Speaker, no.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to, I think all Albertans know that the Premier never answers the questions anyway. Mr. Speaker, I think the stars are in the right alignment. I think the stars are in the right alignment. My question to the Premier is this. Given that the former Minister of Consumer and Corporate Affairs has indicated that she did not think that she had complete control over the issues involving Principal Group, and if there's one thing that is given, it is that this former minister is an honest person. Given that fact, will the Premier agree then that there must be others? There must be others who are involved in the direction of those issues concerning the Principal Group.
Mr. Speaker, I gather from that circuitous question the honourable member is concerned about the code report and the response to it and the response to the Principal Group affair, and we have dealt with the report and we have provided our response.
Member for Cardston, followed by the member for Vegreville, then Calgary-Buffalo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Agriculture. In 1987, a committee was struck under the chairmanship of Hugh Planche to promote the the advantages and necessity of the pay-the-producer concept in Western Canada. It became apparent that Albertans were very much in favor of that concept. In recent months, there's been quite a silence from the Minister on this issue. So to the Minister today, having just returned from the annual Agriculture Ministers meeting in Prince Albert, were you able to gain support from the other Western provinces for the pay-the-producer concept?
Mr. Speaker, I think I should first of all acknowledge the good work done by the committee under the chairmanship of Hugh Planche and the good work done by my predecessors on this issue. It's been under debate for some time. And I am pleased to report that we had a good discussion on the pay-the-producer concept as well as the overall transportation policies of the nation in Prince Albert the last 2 days. And in the final communique, there is one paragraph that I think conveys the message. Ministers agreed to participate in a process to review the Western Grain Transportation Act, including the method of payment of the Crow benefit, recognizing that agricultural conditions on which previous policies have been based have changed substantially over time. That component of grain transportation policy plus the others has been directed to a subcommittee of deputies for review and report back in probably October of this year, and the matter was supported not only by Western premiers, but by Western ministers, but by ministers right across the nation.
Communique is read, please.
Supplementary to the Minister, our offset program has cost our province something like $47 million to maintain, and that has allowed us to develop something of a respectable feeding industry and a processing industry that's in its infancy. So perhaps the Minister, although I understand that the agenda for this pay-the-producer concept is in the court of the federal government, could the Minister tell us what kind of acceptance did you get from the federal minister for the pay-the-producer concept?
The federal minister, Mr. Speaker, tabled a paper entitled Agriculture Transportation Issues, which outlines 6 principles that the review is to be conducted under. And I would like to share with the House at least 3 of those principles. Number 1, Canada's agricultural transport program should encourage changes that reduce overall transport and handling costs. Number 2, they should allow diversification and value-added activities, and that's where we really had to push on change the method of payment. And number 3, they should not lead to the need for federal or provincial programs designed to offset the negative effects of another transportation program. And the honourable member for Cardston has already identified the amount of money that we are using to counter the negative effects of the current system. So I think the federal ministers present, and there were 3 of them, certainly recognize the problem and are working with us in a direction to bring about more value added to the prairies.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My final supplementary to the Minister. I think that we all appreciate the fact that the value of this concept to Western Canadian diversification. And so what concrete commitments can you give us pertaining to the action and timing that we can expect? In other words, when will we get it, Mr. Minister?
Mr. Speaker, the report from the subcommittee of deputies, as I indicated, should be filed with the ministers in October. Depending upon the minister's level of acceptance of that will depend upon when it goes public. In my judgment, we're looking at probably an 18-month timeline to hopefully put this together.
Vegreville, followed by Calgary Buffalo, then Lesser Slave Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Premier. Mr. Speaker, the provincial treasurer attempts to reassure Albertans concerned about the future of the Gainers operation in Alberta and concerned about the security of the $67 million of taxpayers' money that the Conservatives used to bail out the Premier's good friend Peter Pocklington by referring to a so-called master agreement that he describes as being so rigid and detailed that it would enable the government to sue Mr. Pocklington should he attempt to close the Gainers plant in Edmonton. Mr. Speaker, Albertans need to know, and I think deserve to know, the details of the deals that the Getty Gang has made with Mr. Pocklington. And I'd like to ask the Premier if he will order his tough-talking treasurer to table in this Assembly the master agreement that he so frequently refers to that was signed with Peter Pocklington in respect to the $67 million bailout package.
Mr. Speaker, again, the honourable member has allegations in leading up to his question which are incorrect. But I draw again his attention as well to the question when he raised it yesterday with me, and I pointed out to him that in all of our deliberations regarding gainers, that we're going to be directed by several factors. One would be to make sure that we have agricultural processing in the province to assist our agriculture industry. Secondly, we want to provide jobs and ensure jobs for people already working in agriculture processing in the Edmonton area. And thirdly, strengthen the economy of Edmonton. And those things still are the factors which direct us in dealing with this matter. As far as the agreement, the Honourable Treasurer has already told the Honourable Member, it places his matter on the order paper, and we'll see what happens.
Well, I would hope being honest and open with the people of Alberta would guide their decisions as well.
Right on.
I'll direct my next question, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Agriculture, who recently described the Gainers plant as old and obsolete and in need of complete replacement in 2 to 5 years. It sounds like he's talking about the Conservative government, Mr. Speaker. But I'd like to ask the Minister, who claims to base these conclusions on certain private sector and departmental assessments, if he will table those reports to which he refers in this Assembly so that we can all see them.
Mr. Speaker, the honourable member from Vegreville is wrong in his prelude. I don't recall ever terming the Gainers plant as being old, obsolete, and ready for replacement. I think the honourable member should know that part of the Gainers plant is relatively new construction. That is the cooling and distribution component of it. The honourable member should also know that there's another component of that plant, which is the processing component, and by far does the most significant amount of processing of pork in the province of Alberta. And it's something that I would hope he would join me in wanting to keep for the producers of this province and the jobs in Edmonton. And there's a third component of the plant, which is a multi-species slaughter floor. And that is a component of the plant that I refer to as being obsolete, older technology, and need of serious upgrading or replacing in a 2 to 5 year period.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Economic Development threw another card on the table yesterday when he suggested that a new Gainers plant might be built to replace the one that the Minister just refers to. And I'd like to ask the Minister to stand up and tell the people whose hopes were raised by his statements yesterday whether or not these statements were based on actual negotiations with Peter Pocklington to build a new plant in Edmonton, or if it was just another ham-handed attempt by him to cover up his mismanagement of the whole issue.
Mr. Speaker, the honourable member has referred on a number of occasions to the press release when the loan guarantee was offered by the former minister. The honourable member only has to read the press release to realize what is included in that. It indicated that there was to be constructed a plant in southern Alberta and that there was to be an upgrading of the food processing facilities in the Edmonton area. That leaves a number of options available to the principals involved. If the honourable member cannot understand that, I'm happy to repeat it for him again, that there are a number of options available so that we can upgrade the food processing facilities that we have within this province so that they do serve in an effective way the primary producers of Alberta.
The member for Calgary Buffalo, followed by Leicester Slave Lake, then Edmonton Kingsway.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Minister of Agriculture as well, a curtain of secrecy and obfuscation has been drawn around the province's $130 million plus financial exposure with respect to Peter Pocklington. And now we have the Agriculture Minister's statement that at least part of the Edmonton plant is going to have to be replaced, and this has raised further cause for concern. And we'd all be better off if the government would release, instead of hiding, all relevant documentation and make a clear statement with respect to the whole truth on this matter. However, we're just going to have to ask it piece by piece. I'm wondering whether the minister is prepared to tell this House whether the loan which is being secured by our $55 million guarantee is current or in arrears at all.
Was that directed to me? Mr. Speaker, I would again share with the House that agriculture's primary concern in the Gainers plant and any other plant is for the service of our producers. My department is in no way involved in any loans or loan guarantees, so I would suggest the honourable member is directing his question to the wrong minister.
To the Minister of Economic Development, will the minister tell this House whether the loan being secured by our $55 million guarantee is current or in arrears at all?
Mr. Speaker, that question is more appropriately put to the provincial treasurer. It was put to the provincial treasurer yesterday, and yesterday the provincial treasurer answered it.
Kickers to Evers to Chetts.
Well, they're demonstrating exactly what we've been saying, Mr. Speaker, and I'm wondering whether the Minister of Agriculture and perhaps the Minister of Economic Development may wish to stand up and say he won't answer this as well. I'm wondering what amendments have recently been made with respect to the $6 million loan agreement relating to the term of repayment, or whatever. What changes were made recently in terms of the amendments which have been referred to?
Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to refer the honourable member, and all he has to do is read Hansard, because these questions were answered in a very open and forthright manner by the provincial treasurer. All he has to do is relate back to the last number of days to Hansard, and questions that he has put himself, whereby the provincial treasurer has answered him in a very forthright way.
Thank you. Lesser Slave Lake, followed by Edmonton Kingsway.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In 1986, the northwestern part of Alberta suffered extreme floods in our history. In 1988, parts of my constituency were devastated by floodwaters. And over the past couple of days, in fact, the past couple of weeks, the Swan Hills area has received very significant rainfall. Can the minister responsible for Alberta Public Safety Services advise the Assembly on the steps being taken to alert citizens in central northwest Alberta as to current possible flood conditions?
Mr. Speaker, there's a system now in place through the river forecast system that's associated with Alberta Environment and other jurisdictions in the province to issue alerts periodically during a day to all citizens in the province of Alberta that might be affected by flooding waters. The most recent alert was issued at 12:45 this afternoon. The next one will go out at 4 o'clock this afternoon. The most acute part of the province of Alberta that now currently is flooding is the area south of the Swan Hills area in the province of Alberta. The state of emergency in the town of Whitecourt that was put into effect at 1:30 this morning was lifted about an hour and a half ago, and there's an acute area of surface flooding now occurring in the area Merithorpe north towards Connor Creek, and I was in discussion with the Reeve of the County of Lac St. Anne about 1:30 this afternoon, and he's alerted, and as is our officials in the county of Barrhead as well. There will be, over the next several days, the movement of surface water that will follow the Paddle River towards the community of Barrhead. And here in the city of Edmonton, the North Saskatchewan River, as a result of the water that's falling just to the west of the city of Edmonton, will probably peak on Saturday afternoon, Mr. Speaker, and the level will probably be 2 to 2.5 meters higher than the current level of the North Saskatchewan River is right now.
Thank you. How confident is the minister that local authorities are in a state of preparedness for possible flood?
Mr. Speaker, a similar question was raised several days ago in the House by another member, and we have here in the province of Alberta an emergency disaster plan that every municipality in the province of Alberta has within its own municipal office, and the first line of alert, of course, is at the local level. Officials from Alberta Public Safety Services have been in contact with all of the municipalities that might be affected by flooding yesterday, today, over the next several days, and I'm advised that there is a very good state of preparedness ready.
Thank you. On what basis would assistance be provided to areas devastated by floods?
Mr. Speaker, because it's almost impossible to determine what might happen on an annual basis in terms of disasters in this province, the mechanism in dealing with costly items that might result out of a disaster are always covered by way of special warrant in this province. To this point in time, I've received no requests from any municipality in the province of Alberta with respect to disaster assistance. I did alert the Reeve of the County of Lac St. Anne about an hour and a half ago that that county should undertake every available thing that they would have to do to protect citizens and then property. And we would, should there be a requirement for the province to assist, then we would sit down with that particular municipality in the weeks after the event to determine what the level would be. At this point in time, it seems that the biggest cost factor might be in the case of road repair. There are a fair number of miles of road that have been washed away by this movement of water, but to my information at this point in time, no bridges have been destroyed or eliminated, and there's no loss to human life.
Edmonton Kingsway, followed by Calgary Northwest, then Cypress Redcliffe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Over the past 5 years, the Conservative government has provided over $30 million to General Systems research in the form of grants, loans, loan guarantees, and share purchases. From the annual report, it's obvious that this money has gone to help cover large operating losses and the accumulated deficit of some $34 million. Now, Mr. Speaker, the official opposition strongly supports the development of an Alberta-based high-technology industry, but that does not absolve the government from its responsibility to be upfront with the taxpayers of this province in its dealings with those companies. My question to the Minister of Economic Development and Trade is this. Given that the consulting company Touche Ross has recently completed a review of the long-term prospects of General Systems research, and given the large amount of money at stake for the Alberta taxpayers, will the minister release that document? Economic Development and Trade, I said.
After you, Alphonse.
Technology.
Mr. Speaker, it's as I indicated to the House not so long ago, the company is in a period of assessing its business plans. It has two areas of technology that are really quite foremost. These are laser cutting as well as the aerospace. And recently, it has had some success in establishing markets in each of those areas. However, at the same time, it has had some difficulty in bridging the gap from establishing itself in the viability of its research and taking it through to the commercialization stage, and that has resulted in, from time to time, difficulties with respect to cash flow. But at the present time, the company is continuing to assess its business plans, its potential, and to see if it can maximize in some way the technology that it has and the expertise it has, and all within, of course, the viability of the business itself.
I take it the answer is no, he's not going to release that report. Well, perhaps this minister would tell me whether he's going to release the other report that his own department did then and that was prepared for the middle of June.
Well, Mr. Speaker, that's from time to time we have obviously the responsibility to keep, because of the amount of investment that the government has in GSR, we do keep a monitoring system going, and from time to time obtain reports for our own internal use in order to assess the ongoing viability of that company, and that's an ongoing process.
Well, given that the minister is hiding these two reports, perhaps he can provide Albertans with an estimate of how much it's going to cost us over the next 5 years then to make this company viable.
Mr. Speaker, I think the question is totally hypothetical.
Entirely hypothetical. Calgary Northwest, followed by Cypress Redcliffe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When Via Rail was threatened in 1985, this provincial government did not find the time to prepare any submission to a task force which was traveling the country at that time in support of Via Rail. And now when Via Rail is once again threatened by a federal government that is insensitive to Albertans' needs, another task force is traveling the country to alert the citizens of the plight of Via Rail. My question is to the Minister of Economic Development and Trade. will the minister or someone from his department be making any representation to the task force which is currently traveling the country?
Mr. Speaker, as the honourable member is aware, we've been actively involved in the preservation of the Via Rail service. And I want to compliment the Liberal senators and members of Parliament that are on that task force. They're so concerned about saving Via Rail that they're using their free rail passes and possibly depriving paying customers of paying to retain that very valuable service. But notwithstanding that fact, I think they are performing a very worthwhile purpose in receiving representation. As the honourable member is aware, we've established our own task force under our deputy minister, whereby we do have a number of municipalities that are directly concerned serving on that task force. They are to report to me by the end of August. Plus, I've indicated to the honourable member that we have communicated directly with the Minister of Transportation and the Deputy Prime Minister, indicating our deep concern and to, in the strongest possible way, leave them with the strong assurance of our support to preserve what we consider a very vital link in the tourism industry within this province.
Well, I'm glad to hear that we have a task force. Since we're all working towards the same end for the benefit of Albertans, will the minister set aside his petty partisan outlook and forget about free rail passes and direct his task force to work together with the task force that is now coming across by the Liberal Party?
Mr. Speaker, we are open to working with anybody. If the Liberal group wishes to make a representation to our task force, I'm sure our task force would hear it.
That's an interesting twist, turning it around. But anyway, has the minister sought the support of Alberta's 26 federal MPs to speak in support of Via Rail to maintain it for Albertans?
There's only one you can count on there. Mr. Speaker, it says I've indicated to this minister and this member and a number of other members in the legislature that we have on an ongoing basis made representation not only to our own members of Parliament within this province, but those individuals who do have specific responsibilities, such as the Minister of Transportation and the Deputy Prime Minister, who is also a member of Parliament from the province of Alberta.
Cypress Redcliffe, followed by Edmonton Strathcona, then Edmonton Whitemud.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Associate Minister of Agriculture. And to the Minister, questions have been asked of that Minister in the House relating to crop insurance and the improvements to the crop insurance system. And now that the Minister has just participated in a National Ministers of Agriculture conference, I wonder if the Minister can share with the Assembly any improvements that were negotiated at that time, and I mean improvements to help the farmers, not improvements to decide who's going to pay for it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, I'd be very pleased to share with the legislature the progress that was made in our federal provincial ministers' meetings in Prince Albert in the last 3 days. We are very satisfied with the progress that has been made and the cooperation that was shown by all ministers from across Canada and indeed our federal ministers. We were able to come to an agreement on a number of areas that I think will be of very prime interest to Alberta producers, because in fact they are improvements that they have asked us for. One is in flexibility of the program. Another is in a commitment to change in federal legislation to allow indexing rather than the hard averaging on crop losses, and an opportunity to establish criteria and methodology to incorporate new specialty crops that don't presently have a historic data to work with. A way of looking at risk splitting, which was of great concern to producers in this province. I think maybe the primary achievement of this move was in the cooperative feeling among all provinces that this is very important to our producers and that we are committed to work very hard with our federal counterparts to see these improvements achieved.
Mr. Speaker, I wonder if the Minister can outline to the Assembly if discussion took place on who is going to pay for these improvements and how much it is going to cost the producer?
That was definitely discussed. It wasn't I suppose, one of the main agenda items, but it was discussed, and we have not changed our position in Alberta. We are committed to an improved, enhanced program for our producers, and contingent on our ability to achieve that, we are willing to negotiate cost sharing, and the cost sharing that we are identifying as a possibility for our producers is 25% federal, 25% provincial, and 50% producers, which is no change to the producers of this province.
Mr. Speaker, I wonder if the minister can outline to the Assembly when that minister expects to see concrete results of those changes, which crop insurance year?
There is, Mr. Speaker, a very real dedication on behalf of the federal and provincial ministers and our various corporations of hail and crop insurance to see as many of these improvements and enhancements put in place for the 1990-91 crop year. There are some changes in legislation that will be required, I outlined, but the commitment is there. I would say that Alberta, probably through the dedication of the members of the legislature, and they know who they are, that have worked very hard on this program, as well as the members of our corporation for putting their resources forward. I would give this commitment to all members that we will continue to commit all of our resources to achieving these improvements in the 1990-91 year, and it will take a lot of work and a lot of cooperation, but we're willing to do that.
Edmonton Strathcona, followed by Edmonton Whiteman.
Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Attorney General and concerns the principle of an aspect of it. He full well knows, Mr. Speaker, that when a search warrant is executed, then the law requires in general that the warrant and the information on which it's based becomes public. In January of this year, the federal government instituted inquiries under the Competition Act and laid an information, and the judge's order at that time said that upon laying of charges, the warrant and the information on which it's based would be unsealed. As you know, Mr. Speaker, charges have been laid under the Competition Act by the federal government, yet the clerk of the court and his administrative assistant refuses to make public the warrant and the information upon which it's based. I brought this matter to Attorney General's attention yesterday, Mr. Speaker, and I would like his assurance, Mr. Speaker, that he has advised the clerk now to obey the law, obey the judge's order, and obey the criminal code, and will allow the information to be disclosed to any member of the public wishing to read it, together with the warrant itself.
Hear, hear.
Mr. Speaker, I do realize that the honourable member from Strathcona did contact my office last evening to determine the release of the search warrant. I was not able at that time to obtain the information, and I'm pleased to advise the member and the House that there was a justice who did seal the search warrant. It was put into an envelope, a plain envelope that had SW13 on it, and the order of the court at that time was to release it when the action was commenced. The action has been commenced, but with nothing on the envelope, the clerk was uncertain. He went to the justice that gave the original order. That justice said he was not empowered, that Justice Berger was empowered on this, and I understand that an application can be made for determination in this on August 10th, and I understand that's going to be the procedure.
Mr. Speaker, the involving of another judge would be quite unnecessary if the clerk had read and obeyed the order as it stood, which I have here and quite clearly says it is to be unsealed when the charges are laid. My question, therefore, by way of follow-up to the Attorney General, is what unwritten rule is it that so terrifies the clerk of the court that he will not obey the face of an order that says that it is to be unsealed when the charges have been laid?
More cover-up.
Mr. Speaker, that's preposterous. That the member from Kingsway who isn't involved in the question is preposterous in his musings. The honourable member from Strathcona is correct that there is some confusion in this matter. The clerk is not always the official that's sitting in the court when something happens, when the order was granted. There was no designation put on the envelope, and with this confusion, the original justice was approached. He was no longer seized by the matter, and it had to go to the other. Probably, I would admit that there's some administrative error, that there wasn't proper identification put onto the envelope. I don't think that this is obstructing any procedures that they need. It's an unfortunate circumstance, but it's being rectified in August the 10th.
Well, it's just incompetence, Mr. Speaker, and my question is that when this order is obeyed and the warrant and the information is disclosed, will at the same time the Attorney General order that any other warrant that has been laid in connection with the principal affair and executed will be disclosed also, as the law requires and as the criminal code in fact requires?
Mr. Speaker, any order given by a justice is given by the judiciary, who is independent from any politics. If there's another search warrant that might be given in this instance, the honourable member can approach the court and find out if he can access it.
Edmonton Whitemud.
Edmonton
Whitemud.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, recently a number of ethnocultural centres in Calgary expressed concern that they too may be forced to close their doors because of accumulated property taxes. And we know a number of centres in Edmonton have had a settlement forced on them, crippling their financial future. More and more cultural centres throughout the province are facing the threat of closing the door, even those that are located in the Peter Lougheed Multicultural Village, those that this province encouraged to build. My question is to the Minister of Culture and Multiculturalism. Have any recent attempts been made to rescue these centres from this financial straitjacket and at the same time institute fairness in the handling of ethnocultural communities?
Time for question period has expired. Might we have unanimous consent to complete this series of questions? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Minister of Culture, Multiculturalism.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The short answer is yes.
I didn't hear him. What did he say?
He said yes. It has been.
Mr. Speaker, as a courtesy to the House, would the minister please make an attempt to elaborate somewhat?
Mr. Speaker, this matter has been dealt with in the House as well as it could be on a number of occasions, as I've explained to the member from Whitemud in his maiden question in this Assembly, that this tax problem is a municipal problem, that they are taxed, the centres are taxed due to an unfortunate circumstance in municipal politics, that they can be taxed as either commercial enterprises, and in fact some of them are and are exceedingly wealthy, or they can be taxed as residences, and not, obviously they are not those. What is required here is an amendment to legislation, and I again inform the House that this matter is under active consideration.
Mr. Speaker, and I hope it's not being considered forever and forever. Mr. Speaker, my question to the Minister of Municipal Affairs, in reference to the legislation referred to, the forthcoming legislation, possibly you could indicate when it's coming, but in reference to that legislation, is there going to be indication, or which level of government will be expected to absorb the losses in revenue
if that provision is there to allow the municipalities to tax at a lower level.
Mr. Speaker, the amendment would come under the Municipal Taxation Act, which would reflect on the revenue of the municipalities of the province.
Thank you. Question period is over. Request under Standing Order 40, member for Edmonton Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and members of the Assembly. I'd like to, under Standing Orders 40, move a motion for unanimous consent to consider the motion as I think members have it before them. Be it resolved that the Legislative Assembly of Alberta send a letter of support and encouragement to Murphy Marabi, leader of the new Mass Democratic Movement of South Africa, in light of recent actions taken by the movement to admit more than 200 blacks and Asians for treatment in whites-only hospitals. Actions which are seen to be the most ambitious civil disobedience campaign against the system of apartheid in South Africa in the last 30 years. Now, speaking of the urgency of this motion, Mr. Speaker, I just would like to point out to members 3 points which I think are very compelling in terms of these world events as they're unfolding before us. First is that it brings home to us the fact that blacks and Asians in all age groups, both children and elderly, currently in South Africa right now are suffering inferior health care because of the system of apartheid. And we in the province of Alberta, and we as Canadians, cannot find acceptable in any compassionate, caring, or resourceful society the fact that that kind of inferior healthcare system continues to exist. And so it is urgent that we send messages to those who are attempting to rectify that kind of situation, that the system be changed. It's urgent that those blacks and Asians who are suffering needlessly right now, right today, unnecessary disease, disability, and death, only because of the color of their skin, that kind of system, whether it's a healthcare system or political system or whatever, cannot be tolerated, and that actions to rectify it and change it need to be supported urgently. I'm told that 50% of the beds in white hospitals go empty, while 50% of blacks in hospitals in South Africa have to lie on hospital floors. And that kind of system needs to be changed. And this action, which needs urgent support, would be like actions of Gandhi or suffragettes in earlier days, or Martin Luther King, or the Chinese students in Tiananmen Square recently, around who we sent a motion of unanimous support. That this action follows in that vein of actions which have a potential of creating enormous social change and need the support of compassionate and caring other people. Another reason for its urgent necessity before us, Mr. Speaker, members of the Assembly, is that because people of conscience such as ourselves just cannot sit back in any apathetic way and say, well, that's nice, good luck to them, but we need to urgently be concerned about them as they are our own brothers and sisters, and as we'd be concerned about our own blood brothers and sisters, so in the world community we need to exercise our concern and our letters of support and encouragement and things that we need to do as we would for our own kith and kin. Finally, Mr. Speaker, as we in Alberta are coming up to Heritage Days, where we're celebrating the multicultural mix of our own province, I think it'd be hypocritical not to be able to support this motion and send this kind of letter of support to people in South Africa. As a great old socialist once said, J.S. Wordsworth, that what we want for ourselves, we wish for all others. And to that end, we need to continue our work to further the world's struggle for justice and for humanity. So with those comments for the urgency, I would ask all members to support this motion before us.
Under Standing Order 40, a request has been made for unanimous consent to allow the debate to proceed. Those in favor of the debate proceeding, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, please say no. No. Request fails. Orders of the day. Orders of the day.
Written questions.